welcome Soraya Sarif, who is a transformation practitioner and an emotional intelligence coach. And she will be helping us to have a better understanding of the power of the brain and how we can use it for our own benefit. Welcome, Soraya.
Thank you, Salam. It's so nice to be here with you.
Thank you so much for your time, Soraya. So tell us more about the knowledge that you have about the power of the brain and how we can it can help us.
So I guess it's a really huge subject, but I guess my fascination with neuroscience and with how the mind works began when I was about 12 or 13 years old. So I'm by no means, a clinician in this area, but I basically evolved my own career, which is coaching and transformation, to sort of reflect a little bit more this area, because it's so important to be able to understand how our brain works if we want to change our lives or ourselves or our environments, or even within the business, to be able to change how things actually flow. And it's interesting because the brain has, multiple components. We have our subconscious mind, and we have our conscious mind, and then we have the brain itself as a physical entity, which comes with its own elements, like its own chemistry and its own structural makeup and its own functionality. And so how we experience life and how we experience clarity of thought, and how we experience moods and how we experience feelings, and the kinds of thoughts we have and the quality of thoughts versus also even the clarity of thoughts. All of those things have so many different factors that sort of dictate the way that we think and what we do and how we feel and how we function as a result. And so, part of my work is really to look at the emotional intelligence component of that. And, also to be able to understand, well, how do we better manage ourselves in light of all of these, different structural and functional ways that the brain, helps us to operate daily, make decisions, and so on and so forth.
So since here in Miss Independent, it's all about empowering women and inspiring them. I was thinking of like having a conversation and a session about how to make women believe that they do have the power and that they are strong. How do we build that in their minds, since it's all in our heads? We keep hearing like whatever thoughts you have or however you're feeling, it's all in your head. You just need to change it.
So
I really want to empower women.
Yeah, it's actually an interesting concept, because we do hear that a lot. We do hear that, it's mind over matter. Whatever is in your head is how, you can make things happen. And it's interesting to actually stop and dissect that concept too, because we're told that everything is in our head. And yes, to a large degree, everything is there, but we have to understand also how it got there, what is actually there, and whether what is there needs to be sort of reprogrammed. And oftentimes what happens is that from childhood, we'll have been in certain surroundings that create our personality, or create, the way that we associate certain, certain things, create certain moods, create certain triggers. For a lot of people, those differences in experience start to evolve into adulthood. And so we start to develop patterns in our thinking. We start to develop patterns in how we feel even. And those patterns also affect the structure of our brain. So based on those patterns, our brain changes even its shape. not just its function, not just the way that it operates. And so in some cases, we've got to figure out, okay, well, what is that inner voice telling me usually? What does that self-talk usually say? Is my inner voice a little bit more positive? Is it a little bit more, negative? What are the things that I'm detecting that maybe it's not a good thing for me to be able to be saying to myself, or to, to have that imprinted in my inner recording? And I think at that point, if we're able to stop and say, okay, these are my thoughts, and sometimes it helps to journal them out. Sometimes it helps to talk about what that natural voice says. Because for some people, that natural voice is very critical. We can be our own worst enemy. We can be our own worst critic. But we can also be our own best friend. And it's important to stop and figure out, well, what is that voice saying? And are these the kinds of thoughts that are going to build me up, or are they going to break me down? And if they are going to break me down, then I need to then stop and say, okay, well, how is it that I start to re-record what is going on inside me so that I have a better quality of thoughts? Now, that becomes self-belief. So when we look at our self-esteem and we look at, there's a direct connection with the messages that we've been hearing since childhood around us, or that we've created for ourselves, sometimes out of situations that have arisen. Sometimes we draw certain conclusions about the world around us, and those messages or those beliefs, they set into us at a much, much deeper level. And so when we're able to stop and say, okay, now I understand what that voice is. I know what it's saying to me. Maybe that's not exactly what I need to be telling myself or hearing in order to actually feel like, I'm capable of doing X, Y, or Z. That's the time at which we have to start to shift that internal voice. Now that's looking backwards. If we have to also then look forward, okay, there's a whole other area to explore here, because many of us want to set goals for ourselves, and we want to be able to manifest those goals, or work towards those goals in a way where we feel capable of achieving them. And so, for example, if I wanted to be, let's say, a homeowner, okay, I wanted to buy a house. Rather than me feeling in this moment that maybe I'm incapable of buying a house, or, I don't own anything, and focusing on the fact that I have that lacking in my life, or I don't have currently what I want to be able to have or achieve, that focus, if I'm able to take that focus and just shift that focus into the space where I can see myself owning a home, or I can see and feel what it would be like to own a home. Okay, that opens up a whole angle of the subconscious mind, where we then start to be able to take our dreams, take our goals, take what it is we want to achieve, and start to be able to put it into practice, and start to be able to develop the kinds of behaviors or the beliefs internally that actually get us closer to achieving. And that's a whole other area that, we tend to consider to be sort of the law of attraction, if you will. So a lot of you might have heard that terminology a lot. When it comes to the power of the mind, and when it comes to the power of the subconscious and how we actually leverage it to manifest or bring into our life what we need, I think that really actually becomes a powerful tool for us, because if we're able to feed it what we want it to grow, it's like planting seeds. It's almost like when you plant carrots, you're going to get carrots. You're not going to get apples. And so you kind of know, and you can kind of see over time that when you start to condition your subconscious mind with positive thoughts, that the things around you actually do become more positive. When you start to focus on certain things, you will see more of those things around you. It's almost like, when you're going to buy a car, for example, and you set yourself on a specific model and you start to research that model, all of a sudden you start to see more of that model around you on the road all the time. And you start to notice that, this is coming up more and more for me. And there's that element of synchronicity. Synchronicity is when, you sort of, bring those familiar events or familiar connections to what you've been thinking about, into your life all of a sudden. And it feels like a coincidence. But it's not so much of a coincidence. It's kind of an engineered coincidence that these things start to happen. And that's why a lot of people use vision boards for goal setting. A lot of people use, affirmations, positive language, I am statements to be able to actually help them to manifest or, reach their goals or their dreams. And actually, what we see is that these affirmations help us to actually re-record. So as I was telling you about how the mind works with regards to the past and how we've been, conditioned, these affirmations, when we say to ourselves, I am capable, I am wise, I am confident, I feel great about myself today, I can achieve whatever it is that I need to achieve today, or I can stay positive today. When we tell ourselves these things, we are actually helping our subconscious to record over all of those pre-recordings, all of those preconditionings that might be contributing to a negative inner voice. So in actuality, we're helping that inner voice to actually just become more positive in whatever way we're planting that seed.
I just remembered, like, when you spoke about childhood, and I don't know if law of attraction applies here, but it's definitely, I can say that it's related to the power of mind, because when I was a kid, obviously you're not like fully aware of everything and of the decisions that you're making, but I know there was this inner voice inside me, or whatever decisions I made, they were made subconsciously. It's not like I intended it. Mm-hmm. So there's this one scenario where I was trying to read a book in English, and I wasn't able to do it properly. So and I heard a comment which was negative, that she can't read. Mm-hmm. And I think subconsciously, because I did not take it, I know I did not make a decision to take the next steps in order to fix my English or become better at it. But I know I just started reading books more, and like watching TV and focusing more on the language until I reached to this level. But I guess I can say that's the power of the mind. Like, even though I was only a kid, yet I was able to somehow take that negative comment and make a decision to turn it into something positive.
That's really amazing. And that's actually a great life skill to be able to teach children generally, is how to actually reframe something that often comes through as criticism. Because I think that for us, most of us adults, it takes a certain level of emotional maturity before we're actually ready to receive criticism. And there is a big conflict with our egos when it comes to taking that, negative feedback, where most of the time we reject it initially until we see the pattern that it's creating for us. And if you were able to take that as a child and, take that on as something that you could do something about, that's amazing, because that's an indication that you felt empowered enough to do something for your improvement as a child. And that probably continued well into adulthood. So, for those of us who, sometimes don't take that criticism as well or feel sensitive towards criticism, when we're told that we do something wrong, or we're told that, we're not up to the mark on something or not reaching a certain standard, for some people it will actually discourage them. It'll have the opposite effect. And for some people it's almost like, sometimes our worst subjects in school are the ones we don't take again if they're just optional. It's like some people will shy away from, certain math or science courses if they're not mandatory, just because they may not have done well in them before. We tend to gravitate towards and do more of the things that we are good at, rather than to become, all-rounders or focus on the things that we could improve in. And I think, that's a really great growth story, because that, is a fantastic example of what we could all do more of, taking our challenges or our weaknesses, or, being able to ask somebody for feedback even, and then really taking that on board and working on those things from another's perspective, is it helps us to reduce the blind spots that we have over even our own challenges or weaknesses.
I guess for me it was different, because the subjects that I never liked in school, I'm surprised that I actually did well in them, like really, because probably in my head, again, my mind was like, okay, just make sure you do good so that you don't get to take them again, and just get it out of the way. I guess that's how my brain was functioning at that time.
That's an amazing coping mechanism, but that's a really cool way to have to actually be conditioned. When it comes to mental health, and when it comes to how we're feeling and what we're thinking, we don't have a visible barometer for that. We don't have a visible measuring stick for that. So just the same way we can start to measure things like blood pressure, or we could measure physical symptoms. We could, take our vital signs, take our pulse, take our temperature. There's nothing that will help us to visually see where we're at from a mental health perspective. It really comes down to being able to ask ourselves better questions, to be able to get better answers, to understand where we are. And so, I think it's really important to start to develop the self-awareness behind the mental health, or behind, where we are in terms of our boundaries, to be able to help us to set those for ourselves. There's a lot of times when in asking ourselves, how am I doing on a scale of 1 to 10, or how am I feeling on a scale of 1 to 10, we can start to gauge, we can start to help ourselves to measure that. And that's called a quality quantifier. That's when I take something that, for example, when you go to hospital, there's a pain scale of 1 to 10. How much pain are you in? It helps the nurse at the triage to be able to understand how bad this particular case is, or, what's the severity of the illness that she can't see. And so in a similar way, we need to start to use quality quantifiers with ourselves a little bit more, to be able to ask ourselves, how am I feeling about this? How comfortable am I with this situation on a scale of 1 to 10? Or how comfortable am I with this individual on a scale of 1 to 10? What is it that's hindering my comfort levels in this particular scenario? And I think the more that we start to do that with ourselves or for ourselves, rather than just accepting that we're feeling bad and accepting that we're feeling, not right about something, and then letting ourselves spiral into this, sort of negative zone of, how do I get out of this, or why am I thinking this, or why am I feeling this? I think that's the point at which we're able to take a little bit more control over getting ourselves back to where we need to be. And I think, this starts to become a little bit more prominent as time goes by, when we enter scenarios where, we wish we had done something differently the last time. We can sort of see ourselves spiraling. We start to know that there is a pattern here. We start to see that, okay, there is a decline. That's the point at which we all need to, just pause, stop, and say, okay, well, how do I actually use this quality quantifier to help me get better in this situation? I think it's time for us to accept the fact that there is some worth in working through those negative feelings, but you have to allow yourself to feel them, and you've got to explore them to understand them before you can actually deal with them and get rid of them. Otherwise, what's happening is that we're convincing ourselves that no, I've got to flick a switch. It's like an on and off button that I can turn on my happiness. I've just detected that I'm sad. Oh my God, go into panic mode and let's turn this around. And to be honest, that doesn't do anything. That just puts it aside for later. So there's a point at which we've got to stop ourselves and say, okay, how do I actually work my way out of this? Have I felt it? Have I learned from it what I need to learn? Have I understood from it what I need to understand? And now that I've, sort of taken note of everything that's creating this for me, or what used to happen to me when I was in this spiral, is there a way that I can change my pattern or change my reaction? Or what is it about the circumstance that needs to change? What is it about what I believe from the situation, or what feelings it's creating for me that needs to change? And that's the point at which we can start to work our way out of that while feeling it, so that the next time it comes around, we're 10 times more emotionally mature to be able to deal with that and to take it on and say, you know what? I know now how to cope with this. I know now what the reason why this had triggered me or why this is bothering me. And here's what I'm going to do to actually get over it. That's the point at which we all develop our own coping mechanisms, and we all develop, ways to get ourselves from, if we're feeling a 4 or a 3, for us to get ourselves to feeling, a little bit better, a couple of notches higher, and to always set that bar, set that goal for us to say, okay, how am I feeling on a scale of 1 to 10? If it's below 5, what do I need to do to get up 1 or 2 notches? And identifying those quick behaviors that we can use to be able to then, manage what that feeling is doing to us. Does that make sense?
It does a lot, because to me it was like overwhelming to keep thinking every single day like I should be like 100% flying, and if I ever feel like I'm low, then there's something wrong, or this is not right, I shouldn't be feeling this way. So I'll start thinking, oh my God, what am I supposed to do? I shouldn't be feeling this way. But instead, if I think of it like I'm a human and it's natural that there are, there's ups and downs, and this is life, and we just need to, like you said, find ways and solutions to cope with it, and to at least change a little bit from 2 to 3 or 3 to 4, then that makes me feel much to know that I'm human.
There is nobody that is 100% flying all the time. And I think that's important to remember. Because no matter who I've spoken to, whether it's, C-level executives, whether it's multimillionaires, whether it's the most beautiful people on the face of the earth, or, models and actors and, celebrities, or, there's always something that bothers every one of us. And each one of us have our own set of issues, our own set of problems. Nobody has a perfect life. The definition of life is actually, challenge. It's actually, a series of issues that we're all going to have to continually work through. And that's what makes us grow through life. That's what creates our journey through life. And, it's interesting because we see on social media, especially, we see everybody having a great time and, posting all kinds of wonderful things. And we know innately that that's not real. We know that that's not, what life actually is. Nobody's going to post their problems, and put that out there for the entire world to see. But nobody has a perfect life. It's really about what we make of it. And it's about how we actually respond to the challenges that come our way. So I'm really glad you identified that. I think that's something that we all struggle with, because we forget that, it's not supposed to be, 100% happy or 100% positive all the time. That's just not the definition of life.
And we're not trying to tell you guys that we're against the positivity or any of that. We're just trying to say that we do understand, like, that where some of us they don't also find it possible to reach to that level. So that's what we're trying to say. And also, my mom's the type that always like used to tell me like, stay strong, stay strong. So recently I had a kidney stone and I was at the hospital and I was in so much pain. So the whole time I was like controlling myself until I reached to a level where I couldn't, so I started crying. And my mom's like, no, stay strong, you shouldn't be crying. I'm like, no, but I want to cry.
It's so sweet. It's so sweet. It's just so cute though how generationally, they were taught to cope in a different way. For my mom, and I love that. I love that, there is such a contrast there because it also helps us to learn. I know that for me, growing up, every time that I had a problem, or every time that I had an issue, my mom's coping mechanism was always to pray. And, so she ingrained that in me from very, very young that, this is the way that you're going to get over your problems. And I'm lucky that, we had that generation and their way of sort of, taking us through how they coped. They had very different challenges from what we have today, that's for sure. And it was a very different environment, but there was a certain innocent sweetness in that generation, where I just really hope that we can carry that over to our next generation, even a fraction of it, because it's sweet. It has its own charm to it. We do live in very complex times. So I think now we get to dissect everything and our awareness of what's going on inside us is very different, than perhaps they had at that time. Because, all of this mental health awareness or emotional intelligence awareness wasn't there necessarily at that time to be articulated in these words. It came through wisdom and it came through experience and it came through, a very different or a softer kind of language and application. But that's a generation that through their wisdom, I think we've been able to at least carry on some of their strength and some of their patience and how they coped with their challenges that they had.
You just said what I was about to say, which is patience. I was going to tell you the one thing that I'd love to take from them or to learn from them is patience.
Absolutely.